Welcome back, focused learners. Today, we're diving into an explainer on something totally fascinating. Usually, when we talk about South Korea's technological future, we're looking at standard economic charts or policy papers, right? Well, today, we're throwing that approach out the window. We're looking at a unique lecture that blends macroeconomics with deep metaphysical philosophy. It offers a completely different, almost spiritual roadmap for how a nation can elevate itself on the global stage.
So let's jump right into the big geopolitical question posed by our source text. Can South Korea actually become the world's next AI hub? There's been a ton of chatter recently about South Korea pushing to host a UN AI hub, basically aiming to become this ultimate global platform where top-tier talent, policy, and bleeding-edge tech all collide. But the speaker in our sources asked, how does South Korea secure that strategic spot? Like, how does this go from being just a nice idea to a concrete driver of national competitiveness? Well, the speaker answers this by setting up a pretty wild comparison.
Which brings us to Section 1, the Singapore Plateau versus the Korean Vision.
The lecture makes this massive claim using what it calls the Singapore model. It argues that, yes, Singapore gathered an insane amount of wealth and talent, but it was largely driven by individual material pursuits. And because of that, the speaker says they're actually plateauing right now. They gathered all these intellects and cash, but ultimately lacked the foundational culture to really manage them long term. Contrast that with the proposed South Korean vision. The speaker insists that if Korea wants to win, it literally cannot just copy and paste that material gathering model. Instead, it has to focus on radiating a brilliant culture. By doing so, it creates a true environment of safety, which supposedly gives it this unlimited potential to pull in global leaders.
And there's a really interesting point here about the modern global elite. The source asserts that today's top economic leaders are actively hunting for safety. But wait. We're not talking about military defense or low crime rates here. We're talking about cultural stability. The idea is, if a nation just hoards its wealth, like a closed-off treasure chest, but doesn't cultivate a shining culture, that wealth essentially just stagnates. Global leaders are only going to pack up and move to Korea if it proves itself to be culturally radiant and genuinely secure. Which naturally leads us to the core mechanism of how you actually build that.
And that takes us right into Section 2, the power of inner strength, or Naegong.
Okay, this is where we get into the deeply philosophical, metaphysical core of the lecture. The source introduces this concept of Naegong, which basically translates to inner strength or internal capacity. But the speaker defines it as the accumulation of, get this, quantum energy. According to this philosophy, as humans continually learn, study, and grow, this invisible energy literally stacks up and accumulates inside us. And the lecture claims it's this specific accumulated energy that grants humanity the ultimate power to manage the Earth and eventually the entire universe.
So how exactly does this Naegong work? The speaker uses some incredibly vivid visual metaphors here. First, think of this accumulated inner strength as a literal light shining from within a society. Second, that cultural light acts like a massive magnet. It is the exact force that pulls in global energy, massive wealth, and the best talent in the world. Third, it completely relies on individuals putting in the time to build up their own internal capacity. And lastly, and this is absolutely crucial for the AI hub question, this inner strength is framed as the absolute, non-negotiable prerequisite for managing global economic power. Without it, any wealth you do attract is just going to slip away.
Let's move on to Section 3, the rise of social parents.
So practically speaking, how does a society actually go about activating this inner strength? The speaker introduces a fascinating roadmap involving what they call social parents. It goes like this. Step 1. Everyday people have to put in the work to gather and cultivate their own inner strength. Step 2. Instead of using that power to just get rich themselves, they have to evolve into these social parents, people who act completely selflessly for the benefit of humanity. And then Step 3 is the metaphysical payoff. By stepping up to take care of society, these people naturally receive what the lecture terms heaven's energy, basically ultimate cosmic backing to fuel their efforts.
Now, to understand why these social parents are so necessary, the source outlines a really sharp critique of past systemic failures. It says previous generations of leaders failed because they took their gathered strength and just built exclusive cartels. They hoarded power purely for self-interest. And the speaker uses this brutal metaphor here, stating that these elites treated the general public merely as nutrients, just draining them for their own survival, which inevitably made life incredibly hard for everyday citizens. So the whole social parent model is positioned as the direct antidote to all that historical selfishness.
And here is a fundamental rule in this speaker's philosophy. You cannot beg or plead for this metaphysical heaven's energy. It just doesn't work that way. Nature operates on a strict system of cause and effect. If a group of people genuinely comes together to work for the betterment of society, nature is automatically obligated to hand over the energy and resources they need to succeed. It's not a favor. It's just an automatic, natural response to selfless action.
Which brings us to Section 4, attracting global wealth and the economic impact.
So how does all this internal philosophical work actually translate back to becoming a global AI hub? Well, the speaker envisions a very clear three-phase sequence. Phase 1. The citizens of South Korea embrace this mindset, acting as social parents to pioneer a new era of world peace and societal well-being. Phase 2. As this new culture begins to radiate that magnetic light we talked about earlier, global leaders and intellectuals will naturally migrate to Korea to learn from that incredible stability. And finally, Phase 3. Those migrating leaders, they will inevitably bring external economic wealth, technological advancements, AI infrastructure, all of it, right along with them. The wealth is just a byproduct of the culture.
The source actually drops a pretty intense warning here to drive this point home. Quote, "If you envy money and get greedy, even what you have will be taken." Wow, the speaker is incredibly adamant about this. South Korea absolutely must not be motivated by mere economic envy of other nations that have achieved temporary financial success. Chasing money directly, according to this philosophy, actually repels it and ends up stripping away your current blessings.
So, pulling the whole shebang together, here is the final roadmap to becoming the UN AI hub according to our source. First, absolutely do not envy the material wealth of other nations. Second, stay deeply thankful for the resources you currently possess. Third, focus literally all your energy on fulfilling your societal duty by building up that inner strength. And finally, if you do those things, you just watch. You watch as the global economy, top-tier talent, and technological hubs naturally follow the light your society is radiating. It is entirely a model of attraction rather than aggressive pursuit.
It's a truly wild, compelling perspective that completely flips traditional economic strategy on its head, right? Moving the focus away from external acquisition and entirely on the internal cultivation. So, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on today, directly inspired by this lecture. When you look at your own day-to-day life and work, are your pursuits driven by material envy of what others have, or are you driven by a genuine desire to build your own inner strength to serve the society around you? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.